Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Shatter the Script podcast. We are back on a new kind of revamped schedule. That way I can get ahead of the action and have more relevancy than being more of a week behind. But this is week 9 and 10 for NFL and college football. So we'll be talking about both per usual. If you're a first-time listener, we appreciate you having me in. You can follow us at the Shatter the Script on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Or you can find us searching Shatter the Script on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. We'd appreciate a follow on all of those platforms. You'll see a lot of video content on TikTok, a lot of my analysis as things are happening instantly on X. So any followers and subscribers would be greatly appreciated from you guys. So before we get started, let's outline what we're going to have to talk about, what we get to talk about today. So first off, we had some great college football action once again this week, kind of taking the NFL over by storm with this new 12-team playoff format. A lot of people are still in the hunt. There's actually such thing as in the hunt in college football these days. But the big one, LSU and Texas A&M, so we'll be talking about the difference makers in those games and what separates some SEC teams from the others. And then, of course, we have a little bit of trouble in Austin, Texas, maybe, with the UT Longhorns getting a close one to Vandy. Vandy is a spoiler. That was a close one. We're going to go into that just a little bit. This is a weird one. I don't know how much in depth I'm going to get into this one. I might just make it short and sweet. But politics and sports. So this is starting to become a recurring thing, but it's on the opposite side of the spectrum now. So now it's kind of like, how do you apply a double standard? And then my 2020 vision quarterback of the week. This time I'll be a week ahead instead of a week behind. And then my 12th men segment, it has returned. This is going to be my top 12 college football teams. And then on top of that, I have a little fun segment. My personal favorite movie is The Other Guys with Mark Wahlberg, Will Ferrell, and of course, Captain Gene. And Captain Gene makes TLC references throughout the movie. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Ain't too proud to beg. Got to creep. I don't want no scrubs. So those players, those teams that are almost in my top 12 get those nicknames, and I'll explain why. So let's get right into it with the Shatter the Script segment. And there's a link at the bottom. Okay, this is a fun one. I know I keep getting to talk about the Texas A&M Aggies, but they're kind of taking the SEC and the college football world a little bit by storm because of what Elko is building in College Station. And in grand fashion, they bring out their blackout uniforms with the script Aggies on the side of the helmets, hosting number 8 LSU and Texas A&M. Honestly, the outlook going into this game, as I explained last week, was that they're kind of very similar teams in terms of their record, how they've progressed throughout the season. Both of them took a loss that, looking back on it, they should not have taken that L. You could argue Notre Dame, because a lot of people are saying that Notre Dame is for real, which I'll get into that a little bit later. But A&M takes a loss to Notre Dame week 1, right? 23-13. Weigman looks like absolute dookie water. And then you get an LSU-USC rematch, which way back before Obama even was in frickin' office, you had LSU and USC and one other team in the hunt for the national championship. As I think I explained this a month or two ago before the college football season started. There was history there. And LSU should have taken it personally and just gave it to him. But then you had Brian Kelly have the world famous, and here we are again with that, that little tantrum that he threw at the end of the. So we all thought LSU was fraudulent. And I thought they were soft. Then they progressed, right? They both, Texas A&M and LSU, beat a top 10 team. Are they frauds? Or is Ole Miss a fraud? I don't know, but LSU beat them. I believe they're frauds. But is Missouri fraudulent? Yes. I believe that they're not as good as everyone says they are, but they've had some quarterback injuries. That might be part of the case. Both were ranked number 9. A&M beats Missouri. LSU beats Ole Miss. And then they went out the rest of their games. Both have beat Arkansas, right? 6-1 going into Kyle Field. A&M has played LSU pretty decently well historically. I just was like looking at this game like Elko. I'm taking Elko over Brian Kelly. I'm sorry. And as this game's progressing, you watch this defense busting their ass to fight, against the Tigers. And Nussmeier, to his credit, I know he finished very poorly. He started with like 290 yards passing in the first half. However, they could not run the football. Almost all of their yardage was through the air. So shout out to the D-line. As this game progressed, you're watching Weigman thinking, oh my God, what do you possibly have for an excuse as to not move the football like in that kind of fashion? Because Le'Veon Moss was moving the football, Daniels was moving the football. The defense was doing their job, in terms of college football. Defenses, higher scoring expectations, right? And over time, you were just like, you got to make a change because there's an element that LSU is not respecting to Connor Weigman. And if he can't complete a simple pass, he was firing 95-mile-per-hour bullets to the check down, and they can't catch it. And granted, there were some drops. There was just no mojo. And so after a while, you had to just kind of look at it and say, well, shit. Well, hold on. Who's behind me? Who's at number 10? It's Marcel fucking Reed. That's who it is. The guy who went 3 or 4-0 for you. He is no interceptions on the year, 6 touchdowns. Yeah, there's not an element to the passing game that Marcel Reed has shown thus far in comparison to Weigman on that 3 or 4 game stretch. They make the change instantly. I'm sitting there watching the game and I'm running read option here right after that interception, right? I'm running read option here. Boom, touchdown, read option. Hire me. I'll assist Colin Klein. But as this game was just back to back to back to back, the momentum completely switched, and that stadium got the loudest that I've ever seen. I'm sure my little brother can attest. He was somewhere in the stands. Just erupted. There was no changing that momentum. Once Marcel Reed came in, they were running simple but technical read option plays that LSU just could not figure out and stop. And one of my favorite parts about this move is that you were already getting good production on the ground. The element that you bring into the game when you put in a guy like Marcel Reed, who has an outstanding dual threat capability, is that those 3 to 4 down linemen that you have on the field, or that edge rush player, that guy on the outside of the tackle box, right outside of the hip of that tackle, he is eliminated from your offensive line's responsibilities when you're running these read option plays. So the offensive line gets to move to the second level and get to that linebacker to cause a gap. And that's if that edge player outside of the hip of the tackle does not bite on the fake. Well, if he bites, guess what? Well, you got to bring another safety to spy on that. Have you prepped for that all week? No, you've been prepping for Weigman. And it was just too much for LSU to handle. And just the despicable face of Brian Kelly as this was all happening after an interception after interception after interception after sack, it was just brutal to watch. My concern, though, I think it was when it was 28-17, was that Marcel Reed had not had to, drive the length of the field yet. He had favorable position, right? Well, then he throws one of the greatest passes that I have seen in college football this year to Noah Thomas, number 3. Just a beautiful 3-ball, 40 to 50 yards downfield. Well, back in the red zone, guess what? We can go back to the run game. And what happens after that? Another touchdown. That's right. And Aggies finish this game 38-23. Now, the outlook moving forward for the Aggies, so before I move on to that, outstanding win from Texas A&M. I have not seen this college program do something like that where it actually mattered in a long time. And I'm talking like I see them do it when they're 7-4. Well, there's nothing to play for at 7-4, right? Well, this time you're 6-1, and this is usually a game they lose historically. Dominating win in the second half. Outscored, I think, something 30-plus points to 6, I believe. And, moving on, the outlook into what the Aggies are going to get themselves into. I think they got Auburn, and then New Mexico State and South Carolina, which South Carolina and Auburn, both 100% trap games. 100%. You got to finish, take it one game at a time, and just show up. And so one of the things that's going to be challenging for A&M is that last final game, Texas, right? And Texas is going through a little bit of struggle. And I guess I'll transition into that. Texas, I didn't get to watch too much of this game, but Vanderbilt is that spoiler team. It's that type of team that has a spunky quarterback that can get in the rhythm, that can make the plays. We saw it versus Auburn. And are they a playoff team? No. But are they a good program? They were supposed to be nerds. Well, they're 5-3. They're not a 5-3 team. They are who I thought Kentucky was going to be early on in the season. Now Kentucky has fallen pretty drastically. But, I think Vanderbilt probably end up ranked. Now, is it concerning that Texas only won by 3 points? In my opinion, yes it is. And whether that has to do with getting beat up by Georgia the previous week and then maybe having a lack of confidence or maybe some physical setbacks going into this game because the Georgia Bulldogs came in and roughed you up in your own house. Yeah, for sure. I can see that. But, I was talking to one of my buddies who is a Texas fan, but he's one of those realistic guys, right? And me and him, we talk college ball all the time. He is thinking about going to that Arch Manning train. He really is. He's saying that the offensive production with Ewers has been poursome in moments that count. When the times gets tough, when the games get tight, there is no separation. There is no outlandish play. Similar to what I've kind of said about Carson Beck. He's more of a product of the guys around him. Now, this is kind of a sad thing to hear as my Apple Watch is recording everything that I say. Now, this is just one of those things, in my opinion, that it's a lot like A&M. It kind of is. I mean, you've got a spunky quarterback sitting the bench who there's high anticipation for. Obviously, Arch Manning has a greater name, a greater anticipation than Marcel Reed. I get it. But Wegman, going into the year, it was more of an anticipation. Both Ewers and Wegman have battled through injuries throughout their collegiate career. Both went in, kind of proven that they can win a lot of games. It's just a tough scenario because you're in such high anticipation of where your program can skyrocket to. You just don't want to take that risk and lose that step. But when something like Marcel Reed going against LSU and down 10 and you end up winning by 20, almost 20, 15 points, then you're like, okay, Marcel Reed's got to be the starter. He has to be moving forward. With Texas, I think they're scared to death that might happen. I just don't think it will because that moment happened in the Georgia game. And what happened? He only got one drive, and it was, all right, we're back to Ewers. Now, granted, Marcel Reed came late in the second half, but I'm just saying there's some very similar aspects here. And Texas, I just think, is a little different in this case because Ewers can produce. I'm a believer he can produce. Now, he's going to win you a national championship. Well, that's a tough question to answer. But can Arch Manning, at this moment in time, who gives you the best chance to win a national championship? I still think it's Ewers. I think you're going greater risk, greater reward with Arch Manning. But there might be some trouble over there in Austin, and with their momentum kind of declining, as the weeks go on, I still think they're one of the toughest teams at SEC to beat. And that game with A&M at the end of the year is looking a lot more interesting. All right, now here's the interesting one of the Shatter the Script segment, that I kind of want to get into. So we've been seeing, obviously, this is one of my favorite comments to joke about, and it's shut up and dribble, right? Like it's when any type of athlete says anything political, you use that old adage that, in my opinion, is hilarious. You just say, man, just shut up and dribble. That's unbelievable that you'd be able to speak your mind, right? And we see this most of the time, I feel like, in the NBA. Especially, I would say since the bubble. It just seems like coaches like Popovich, Steve Kerr, Doc Rivers, and all these guys, they just seem to talk about it more often than not. And for what reason this topic comes up, post-game interview, beats me. But, historically you had obviously the elephant in the room, Colin Kaepernick, who, took a knee in protest against police brutality, and that's kind of when the Black Lives Matter movement started, and you had that uproar, and it sent shockwaves throughout the NFL, and of course, with a certain candidate in office leading up to a different candidate in office, that was a large topic of discussion, right? And people were questioning, does politics belong in sports? Do you have a voice in sports to talk about politics? It's just your job to play sports, right? These are human beings. They have a platform outside of the field and outside of the stadium and outside of the court that is, they hold this certain responsibility, right? Little kids in Make-A-Wish, might ask for one of these athletes to show up at their door. They're role models. They're superstars. These stars have a voice that can send an echo. That's just why political candidates ask for, Hollywood actors and athletes to endorse a certain candidate, especially if you have a relevant voice in the media. Former athletes especially. Like, somebody would kill to have, Shannon Sharpe endorse one candidate or the other. That kind of thing. And so Nick Bosa shows up recently after the 49ers defeated the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football in a post-game interview with, on the field with a Make America Great Again hat. And of course, Twitter's uproaring and say, hey, where's the other side on this, checking, Nick Bosa for supporting this candidate or whatever. And I think you're getting shaken up a little bit about the difference between the two. I really do. And it's going to come off as biased because you look at the color of my skin and you start judging, right? But I think it's a little different. It's not a protest. A protest is very controversial. I'm not saying, that 100% should have been allowed. It's for Colin Kaepernick and other athletes to protest. If you want to protest, you want to take a knee, you have the right to do so. That's the beauty of America, right? If you want to be the only one standing when all the rest of your teammates are kneeling for the anthem, but you want to stand there and not wear that shirt and say, this is just not something I believe in. This is why I stand for the anthem. Here's my reasoning. Here's my opinion. Here's my voice. 100% warranted. And the rest of the people that kneeled, 100% you get your voice. You want to burn the American flag? You can. Do I want you to? Absolutely the fuck not. Why? It's, you can get into why America is one of the greatest places to live, regardless of all the crap that's going on right now, right? And having these athletes talk about it in a certain way and just say, I support this candidate, right? Coming up to one of the biggest elections that, we've ever really been around. With sports, how does that relate? Does this start a shockwave for other athletes to say, I support this, vote him out of office? I mean, here's a great one that people, I can't believe I just remember this. Here's a great one that a lot of people that attack Nick Bosa for what he did keep forgetting. And it's honestly shocking that no one has remembered this. Who remembers getting bombarded by commercials every single commercial break telling your ass to go vote? And it always leaned a specific way. Yes, there was no particular candidate that was recommended, but the organization which represented those commercials and what they painted in the end zone and what they represented outside of the field, it leaned toward a specific candidate and it was shoved down your throat consistently. Pause. Who's on their ass, right? Who's on their ass? That's the NFL. So the NFL is automatically condoning permission to do that for the athletes. If another athlete wanted to come out with a different hat that said, I believe in this, you can 100% do it. It honestly is, if you're just showing support for a candidate, It honestly is just the same thing as coming out with a charity that you support. It really is. I mean, what impact does it have on you? Yes, an athlete does have an impact off the field, like I mentioned earlier. But if I said, yeah, Faith Fight Finish Foundation, go support it. Here's the hat. Check out the merch, right? Ask for help on the wrist. I'm quoting Dak Prescott because he's one of the guys that I remember that he has these sort of things. Tim Tebow. Do we need to keep religion out of sports? No, obviously not. But Philippians 4:13 on the eye black. People had a problem with that. People chastised him for being a Christian on the field, blatantly a Christian on the field. Why didn't we check the criticism for that, the chastising for that? We don't. It's only when a particular candidate is involved, and we all know who that is, and we all know the reasons why this media group hates him and whatnot. I mean, you can go on and on and on about, the outer rings of that argument, right? But to shatter the script here, do politics belong in sports? It's up to the player. It's up to their voice. It's up to the individual with, freedom and justice for all, right? And that is why we have the First Amendment. If athletes couldn't speak on a certain issue, and I get it, a lot of people say America's a corporation. If athletes could speak on a certain issue, then why it just wouldn't make any sense in terms of common sense and logic. It just wouldn't make any sense to me. You would be restricting somebody that has a lot of influence from convincing maybe an individual that hasn't voted yet to go vote, which is why they push those commercials, which is why, Colin Kaepernick wanted to make a change back then, whether it did shit or not for that community, he wanted to. And he tried to do something about it, and he tried to be different. Now, is he a fraud now? Yes, 100%. Yeah, Colin Kaepernick is a fraud. And every time he's going to step out for a tryout, it's just a media parade, and then he says, oh, you know what? I just decided I don't want to play. But, thanks for calling and for showing up in, Ohio to watch me play. I think I'm still just going to make a couple $100 million for my Nike endorsement and making movies about how the NFL is slavery. Give me a break. Okay. Honestly, that was a quicker Shatter the Script right there. But, under 30 minutes. I'll add a couple more. So, here's a short one for you. Anthony Richardson. So, Anthony Richardson has been on my QB epidemic list for a while. That first episode that I came out with, I talked about how there is an epidemic in the NFL with current, new, up-and-coming quarterbacks. And you kind of see it with Bryce Young. You kind of see it with Anthony Richardson. Early on in the season, this is like complete shatter the script. Nobody's going to believe what I just said. But Jaden Daniels, if you go look at the passing chart, they are only throwing to one side of the field, practically. But as the season has grown older, we have seen that Jaden Daniels is in fact someone who can be explosive. He seemingly reminds me of Lamar Jackson. And obviously that's like the casual comparison, but they literally play the same. They basically run the same offense. You can't look at him and say it's anyone else. I'm sorry. But Anthony Richardson started his game like 2 of 15. Now, there is film where you went in and he did throw a lot of contested balls that were accurate. I will give him that. And he had a drop touchdown to, I believe, their running back, number 31. I'm forgetting his name. So there was some missed throws in there. But that doesn't add up. The 6 or 7 that I saw on a 2-minute video or whatever it was does not change the fact that you're below 50%. He's at 44% completion. And they're talking about whether or not they need to make a quarterback change. And I talked about this 4 weeks ago, about how there's a quarterback epidemic. And yes, Anthony Richardson is that main candidate. But it's just funny to me that all this is happening and people just look at the fantasy outlook and go, oh my God, like this dude is an extravagant fantasy option. And so they're now evaluating who's going to start. Excuse me. I'm making a quick text right here. They're evaluating who's going to be the next option in Indianapolis. And is it costing them games? I mean, they're 4-4. Honestly, at 4-4, you're not in a bad spot. But every time that Joe Flacco came into the game, he has shown that he can throw for 350 bazillion yards at 40 years old. And what I'm getting at here with the Anthony Richardson thing, yes, his performance has been subpar. His completion percentage has been very subpar. His efficiency, his passing charts, everything's been subpar. Yes, that's part of the QB epidemic. Is he checked himself out on a play in the latter half of the second half. And he explained why. Everybody thought he was hurt, right? Well, he went to the sideline, took a knee, then Flacco came in, and they just handed the ball off, came up with 3 points, right? And I think they lost by 3 or something. And people asked him after the game, they said, what happened? Why did you check yourself out there? Why'd you tap yourself? And you tapped yourself on the helmet, right? I was just tired. I was just pretty tired. And it's just unexcusable to me. It's just kind of unexcusable, and I don't get why such a thing could happen like that. And it's very concerning as a quarterback that you would just check. I've never in my 15 to 18 years of watching college or watching NFL football have I ever seen a quarterback check himself out because he was tired. Now, fact checkers can probably come in there and just blow that thing up. But anyway, I thought that was strange. Something to keep an eye on headed up with the Colts. Moving on. We're going to go into our 2020 vision of the week, and this one's going to be an interesting one because your boy got his receivers back and went against a 5-1 team and played extremely efficient football. And his name is Matthew Stafford. He's your 2020 vision quarterback of the week. And I'm going to pull up his stats here a little bit on the Next Gen Stats. I'm sorry, I'm kind of multitasking here. He had a great game. I think 34 pass attempts, 25 completions, and over 280 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. So, yeah, 25 to 34, 280 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and the W versus the Minnesota Vikings, 30 to 20. And so I'll pull up the chart here, per usual, and we can evaluate why. Because he was slicing and dicing. It's more of his touchdown passes that I want to shout out here because they're all over the place. And I tell you what, having Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back in the mix is highly impressive. As I literally had the chart up. There we go. Unbelievable. I guess NFL just wanted to automatically open it. Okay, here we go. Matthew Stafford. 25 34, 280 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Touchdowns all over the place. Yes, there's a lot of checkdowns. A lot of times part of their game plan is throwing into Kyren Williams. And touchdown 20-plus yards down the field, touchdown 15-plus yards down the field, 2 of them, and another touchdown underneath. Perfect, right? And going in 2-4, I believe, at the time. Now you're 3-4. That NFC division is now a very tight race. It's one of those things that anybody can win it. And I predicted the Rams to be a playoff team early on in the season. But when you watch this game, yes, it was a Thursday night game. For some reason, the Thursday night games just keep continuing to provide 2020 vision quarterbacks. And we all know that Matthew Stafford is a great quarterback. And he's been down bad with nobody. I mean, they just got hit with injuries like you wouldn't believe. Puka's activated last minute. Cooper Kupp activated during the week. They both returned on the same night. Puka Kupp, limited snaps, what they said, takes over with like 7 catches for 106 yards. Cooper Kupp gets you a touchdown. Demarcus Robinson, I think, had 1 or 2 touchdowns. I believe it's Demarcus Robinson. And then Kyren Williams is finding his way around the block, per usual, doing his thing. So the Rams are a different football team with those guys in, 100%. Your defense plays better when your offense produces. Your offensive run game produces when you have a passing attack. You'll see the Rams win a lot more games coming up. I actually would have them winning versus a team like the 49ers if they played again. That's going to be an intriguing story moving forward, having Matthew Stafford back in action. Hopefully he continues that trend. He's a fantasy football waiver wire target for sure moving forward if you don't have a quarterback. And then last but not least, we get our 12th men segment. Now this one's going to be fun because now I finally have a visual to present to you guys. This is kind of why I hesitated to show it last time, but let's pull it up. There we go. It was a cool little visual, huh? All right, well, ignore the, don't ignore it. But don't ignore it. Walk in pairs. All right, this is the fun stuff. This is my top 12. I call it the 12th men. Yes, I'm an Aggie. The 12th men, this is my top 12 teams, and I'm going to explain why. But I want to highlight a couple of teams. I did this 2 weeks ago, but now with new things happening in college football, we can kind of go back and reevaluate it. And I kind of have where they have moved up and dropped to in comparison to the actual AP rankings. Georgia bumps up one spot. They're my number one team. Oregon at number 2. And as you can see, like Texas or Ohio State kind of moved back one. They had a pretty good win over a hungry Nebraska team. Texas, debatable at number 4. I really think that Texas has some issues to kind of solve moving forward. Penn State, they've done nothing to convince me so far that they are a relevant team. Honestly, they're playing everybody too close for my comfort. Tennessee, very impressive. They continue to figure out the passing game, right? Clemson, very good sleeper. They've won out since the Georgia game. Notre Dame has gotten better every single week, and they blew out ranked Navy. That's anti-American in my opinion, so they should be out of that top 25. Texas A&M, one spot above their AP ranking at number 9. Indiana, Miami, and Alabama. Now, I want to cover 4 teams specifically here. And, yes, Indiana is a fun one, and I'll start with them. We'll cover 5 teams specifically, excuse me. Indiana's a fun one, and I'll start with them. Now, they lost their quarterback, and they got College Game Day. They hosted it. Lee Corso's, fun goodbye. And they are playing Will Rogers. I said a spunky team. I predicted 24-21 Indiana. They ended up winning, I believe, by 7, 31-24. They're undefeated, but they have dominating wins, is what's interesting to me, and which is what I appreciate with Indiana. And going into Nebraska and beating them 56-7 is authentic. It's something that we did not expect. It's one of those things like it's a statement game, right? Nebraska is not an easy win. And if they played other teams in that top 10, would they win? I'm not sure. But when they get their starter back, in the witching hour of college football season, I think this is going to be an intriguing team that could make the college football playoffs. Now, the other 2 behind them, yes, I have Miami behind Indiana. And I've given my complaints about Miami in the past. I really have. And y'all have heard it from me plenty. There's nothing Miami has done this year to impress me. Coming back, from 38-10 to California, yes, that's impressive, but it's California. They're not somebody that should be up 38-10. It's somebody that you should be up 38-10. And when you get favorable calls late, it just doesn't convince me. And then you had Virginia Tech. You get a favorable call in the end zone on a Hail Mary. It's just starting to kind of feel like luck. And then you play 1-7 Florida State. Florida wasn't for real this year. Florida State is absolutely pathetic this year. So when you play them, of course you're going to win that game. So 2 games that should have been tough opponents turn out to be not tough one bit. And so Miami is number 11. Do I think they're going to stay undefeated for the rest of the year? Yeah, probably. I don't see any evidence why they wouldn't lose a game. So they're going to make the college football playoff, but I think they're going to be exposed. The current poll, the current bracket, your bracketology, if you will, has Texas A&M matched up against Miami. I think A&M would boat race Miami. Alabama is number 12. Yes, this is 100% debatable. But when you look at 13, 14, 15, and 16, you're just like, Alabama can beat those teams. Clear as day. They've had their struggles this year. Vanderbilt spooked them. But I think Alabama winning 34-0 against Missouri, I think Brady Cook had his injuries, but that's a great win. 34-0. You put up a goose egg. That's impressive. That's a good bounce back. And I'm not hanging on to Saban's Alabama here. I'm really not. I just think with the talent they have with Williams and Milroe and a good running back core and an above-average coach and great recruits, they can do more than what these other teams have shown. They really can. But they are in desperation mode. That 12 spot in my 12th men segment is going to be changing probably every week because that last guy in, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be multiple teams with 2 or 3 losses that deservingly should be in or undeservingly should be in. It's going to be tricky. Somebody's going to get upset, right? Clemson, number 7. They jump up 4 spots to number 11 in the actual poll. I have them at 7 because ever since the Georgia game, they have been a dominating force where they seem like they are back. And Clemson is a fun team. I mean, their defense is an absolute dominating stud-worth team. I think that the rest of their schedule, they can win out. I really do. I would love to see a matchup between Miami and Clemson to kind of separate the two. 7 to 11 in that gap. I have 7 with Clemson and 11 Miami. I think that's a pretty big gap between the two. I think they're closer than most teams imagine. Just those teams in the middle, I think, are separated in that category. And then number 5, Penn State. Now, Penn State, man, they are number 5 because of their record, but a lot like Oregon, I just think at some point they're going to get upset. It almost happened with Bowling Green. Now, maybe that was the magic bullet that missed, but at some point, they're going to get humbled. And I just don't think they have what it takes to win and go deep in this college football playoff. I think they get beat first round. If they get a first round bye, I'd be pretty upset because that team that plays them the next week might be battle tested, might not be. They might get a favorable matchup. Who knows how it's going to shake out. But I just think that Penn State has not really shown me much of anything. Wisconsin is not that good of a team, and they're just not putting up a lot of points. They're really not. They're just not putting up enough points for me to convince me. Call me crazy. And then here's my fun part. And this is this is the fun part. So I mentioned it at the beginning of the episode. I'm multitasking. I'm sorry. This will probably take 5 minutes. A little shorter episode today. So I call this The Other Guys, right? I'm a huge fan of The Other Guys. If you haven't seen that movie, you're missing out. Mark Wahlberg, Will Ferrell, they're New York cops. They're the other guys. They're just a bunch of bozos. At the end of the day, they end up saving the day. Great comedy, great one-liners. This is going to be it moving forward. I thought about it randomly. I was like, I'm jotting that down. I am jotting that down. I'm doing it. Okay, so there's 4 titles here, and these are kind of like the almost in. Like the guys that are almost in that top 12 category. But they have titles to them from the TLC references that Captain Gene, that Michael Keaton uses in the movie, that the other guys call out. So the first one is Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Now this one is Iowa State, classifies as Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Yes, they are outside of my top 12. I just don't think that their strength of schedule represents the top 12 teams in the country. And I think they have dodged some bullets, but are they a great team? Yes, I think they're a great team. I just don't think they can shake and bake in the top 12. But they ain't too proud to beg. You can get in there for sure. My second one is Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. Are you sure? Are you sure you're not quoting TLC, or was that on purpose? Right? Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. This is Ole Miss. Don't go chasing waterfalls, Ole Miss. You're a fraudulent team. Yeah, you got a coach that knows how to coach some offense. You can put up 50 points against one of the worst, the worst of the worst of SEC teams and your non-conference opponents. You got a quarterback that's got his blonde, bleached hair, but your hopes give up hope is what I'm saying. Like the Ole Miss team this year they've been disappointing in games that matter, and I don't think there's any evidence that suggests that they're gonna overcome that and sneak their way into the playoffs. Those 2 losses that they have, Kentucky looking worse and worse, and LSU now looking worse after A&M beat them. It's just one of those games you're like, well, if you had a defense like you never have in Ole Miss, maybe you would have been relevant talking about. But don't go chasing waterfalls. And then got to creep your way in there. Boise State. Got to creep your way in there. Winning another game, another 100-yard game for Ashton Jeanty. This guy is an absolute stud. They got a great offensive core, a great offensive game plan, a defense to kind of complement it in terms of who they're playing against in their conference. They were very close to they played with the best of them. Your number one team in the country currently, Oregon. They played them very tight. That's very convincing to me. Do they have the firepower to win the national championship? No, but Ashton Jeanty is exciting. He's a Heisman candidate finalist. Him and Travis Hunter have my vote for a Heisman Trophy. That's a guy that you want in the college football playoff. No matter if they lose first round. You want all eyes on him, right? He is prime time. Not, of course, I just talk about Travis Hunter and say prime time. And then here's here's the last one. I don't want no scrubs. Are you sure? Are you sure you're not quoting TLC? I don't want no scrubs. BYU, I just don't think the best, Fred Warner came out of BYU, I understand that, but BYU, in terms of powerhouse playing teams, yes, they beat Kansas State by a large margin earlier in the year. I just, no, being top 10, if you took A&M, if you took Clemson, if you took Indiana and played them against BYU, I think they're putting up 45 to 50 points on them. Maybe not Indiana. I wouldn't want to doubt that. But if you played an SEC team is what I'm getting at. Yes, I have an SEC bias. I just think BYU is nothing. And like Vanderbilt, I think can beat BYU. And that's saying something because you got him in, I believe, the top 10. I don't want no scrubs in the college football playoff. I just think BYU there's some scrubs in comparison to the SEC and to some Big Ten schools. And that'll be interesting to see going forward. So, yeah, the other guys in the 12th Men segment presented by Jared May with the Shatter the Script podcast. All right, well, that kind of wraps up our episode today. And we honestly covered everything in a quantitable time. And I'm interested to see how this plays out week to week. We'll be back every Tuesday now. I'm not recording on the weekends, releasing on a Sunday and a Monday. I want it to be kind of in the middle of the week where right after the action happens, you get a fresh outlook on what's happening in the college football atmosphere, what's happening in the NFL atmosphere to get some relevancy. And of course, on Thursdays, every Thursday, the Stats and Scars episode, and every Friday with a new guest, a challenge the script. But we thank you guys for coming out. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Shatter the Script and Twitter as well. Or you can go to our Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts and subscribe on there if you search Shatter the Script. And we are on all platforms consistently posting. So be aware for my power rankings coming out for the NFL. And this was my 12th man in 2020 vision and Shatter the Script. And we thank you. Be back next Tuesday.